Hello and welcome to Decolonizing Education through Indigenous Traditional Knowledge at Kjipuktuk Aboriginal College. My name is Tammy Williams. I'm the Adult Learning Coordinator and Instructor at the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center. There are many motivating factors for why we took the approach to decolonizing education here at the Friendship Center. But mainly what it boils down to is that there has been significant research conducted on Indigenous people around the world, usually at the detriment of the Indigenous people, due to systemic racism, positional superiority, indoctrinated, westernized methods of research that exclude certain facets of Indigenous existence that hold valuable information about the environment, geology, history, disease, and medicines. This marginalization has created gaps in Indigenous education and a lack of equity within the academy, devaluing traditional Indigenous knowledge unless it can be commodified or profited from. Lack of equitable inclusion has led to Western biased views of Indigenous peoples and their value to society, and a general interpretation of what Indigenous means, eliminating individual traits, customs, mores, norms, and cultural values, and replacing them with westernized ones. So a lot of times I'm asked, what exactly is decolonization? So decolonization is about shifting the way that Indigenous people view themselves and the way that non-Indigenous people view Indigenous peoples. Indigenous people are reclaiming the family, community, culture, language, history, and traditions that were taken from them under the federal government policies that were designed for assimilation. Some communities are reclaiming control via self-government agreements, treaties, and other negotiated agreements. It's about revealing, renewing, and rediscovery. So Indigenous people are decolonizing, and non-Indigenous people are anti-colonizing to make space. Decolonization requires that non-Indigenous Canadians recognize and accept the reality of Canada's colonial history, accept that history paralyzed Indigenous peoples and how it continues to subjugate Indigenous people. Decolonization requires non-Indigenous individuals, governments, institutions, and organizations to create space and support for Indigenous peoples to reclaim all that was taken from them. Indigenization is another term that I get a lot of questions about. And really what it is indigenization requires that non-Indigenous people to be aware of Indigenous worldviews and to respect that those worldviews are equal to all other views. Indigenization is about incorporating Indigenous worldviews, knowledge, and perspectives into the education system, right from primary grades to universities. So what exactly is ITK, or Indigenous Traditional Knowledge? According to Leanne Simpson, academic, scholar, artist, musician, author, ITK is the primary source of strength that Aboriginal peoples have to resist the further colonization of our lands and our minds, and to build strong, sustainable nations, and to dream and envision a better future for our children and our relations in the plant and animal worlds. Our ancestors sacrificed, suffered, and worked hard to maintain our cultures in the past, and that responsibility is now passed on to us. Indigenous traditional knowledge is everywhere. It is all around us. It is in the sky, the birds, the trees. It is in our songs. It's in our ceremonies. It's in symbols and artwork that we see all around us. The values are so deeply embedded within Indigenous knowledge that sometimes it's actually difficult to distinguish the empirical content from the moral message. Sometimes when we would hear stories growing up, they would be about animals, but really they were not about animals at all, but about proper human behavior. And sometimes the most hilarious tales about the foibles and misdeeds of animals often contain very wise insights about community ecology or about how to treat each other. Many stories are proprietary to particular families, clans, societies, and tribes. For an example, gardening. It's associated with tobacco, which is a sacred society concern. Grazing animals also belong to another sacred society and may be associated with a number of landmarks spread over several hundreds of square miles of a particular tribe's territory. The specialized knowledge of water and water creatures is associated with ceremonial bundles. Marie Baptiste, a scholar and author from Mi'kmaq, states that individual elders and knowledge keepers carefully observe changes in their landscape and formulate hypotheses about how things are changing. The long-term ecological history of the land is a cloth woven from the threads of stories and ceremonies provided by many different members of the community. Our knowledge keepers are our elders. I started teaching at the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center many, many years ago. At the time, I was teaching a dancing and drumming class for youth. Eventually, that evolved into teaching life skills courses for adults, and from there, essential skills courses. Eventually, I became the instructor for the adult learning program, and now I'm the coordinator. And as the coordinator for ALP, and speaking with our executive director here at the Friendship Center, we decided that decolonizing education here at the Friendship Center was not only important, but it was essential for the intersectional needs of all of our clients. Here at the Friendship Center, we use a two-eyed seeing methodology in our approach to the ALP program. So we are looking at the province's milestones, curricula, and criteria that students need to be able to meet in order to be able to pass their classes. But we're also incorporating culture and Indigenous knowledge transfer methods such as storytelling and land-based learning activities when COVID isn't an issue to round out and take a more holistic approach to the individual learning styles and needs of all of our students. So all of our lessons are individualized. The pace of each lesson and each activity is individualized. The learning is holistic. So any time that I'm approaching a lesson, I have to ask myself, am I meeting all of my students' needs and their different learning styles, whether they be auditory, visual, or kinesthetic? We take very solution-focused strategic planning activities to create goals for work, school, and life. We are incorporating culture and traditional stories to help round out why these goals for work, school, and life are important. And one of the things that we really, truly try to identify here is that many of our students are coping with systemic obstacles and hurdles that are both related to and not related to their race and culture. So it's very important that we acknowledge that and that we build and develop lessons around all of those intersectional needs. Our approach is respectful of Indigenous holism philosophies, beliefs that everything is interconnected. The people, the air, the water, the trees, the animals, everything is related. Umsit Nogama means all my relations, and that doesn't just mean all my human relations. It means everything in the world around us that we are related to. And because of that Umsit Nogama philosophy, we take a very balanced approach to education. So when we develop our plans, they're based on student academic needs, their social needs, their life skills needs, and very importantly, their cultural and spiritual needs. Because intersectional students have intersectional needs. One of the tools that we use here at the Friendship Center, and many, many other Indigenous organizations use these as tools as well, is the medicine wheel. So in 1922, George Bird Grinnell wrote a book, and it included information about a medicine wheel monument and what he learned when he was speaking with the local elders. The one he found had 4 cardinal points for the 4 directions, And there was a lot of speculation around what the purpose of this monument was. Some of the theories ran from that they were a place where the little people, or Wiggladamuj, resided under the ground. Others thought that it was a plan for an old Cheyenne medicine lodge. And then some of the Sioux and Cheyenne elders attributed it to Cheyenne and Arapaho peoples. A more general medicine wheel has been adapted by many indigenous nations over the continent, and that consists of 4 directions: north, south, east, and west. And each of the directions is associated with one of the 4 colors: white, red, yellow, and black, which are usually attributed to the 4 types of man. The 4 directions also represent different times in a human's life: infant, youth, adult, and elder. So I've used the medicine wheel as a framework in many, many different aspects of my career when I had to strategize or view a program, activity, or individual person in a balanced way. The medicine wheel for the students looks at the 4 major needs that each of the students needs to have. And if any of these areas are lacking or overwhelmingly populated with too much of something, then their circle is not in balance. So if you look at the medicine wheel, at the center is the student. Their needs are on the outer 4 quadrants: academic, social, life skills, and cultural and spiritual. If any of those areas are not being met, then that student is not living a life of balance. It is our role here as the ALP instructors to help them to balance their circles. I want to thank everybody for taking the opportunity to hear about all of the different programs and for allowing me the time to explain what it is we're doing here at the Friendship Center and how decolonizing education is playing a major part in how we move forward with our students. So I want to say, Willalan, miigwech, thank you, and merci.